Everyone, and welcome back to Make the Music, and today I'll be breaking down how I recreated Bring Me the Horizon song Drown from their amazing album That's the Spirit. This one took a lot of work, but I think it turned out really well and it was a ton of fun to put together. You can get the stems for this track in the description down below. It's 100% free. Check them out, see how I did. Let's get into the session here, and like I said, let me know in the comments, how well did I match it? I did my best. All right, this is a tough one to do, but it was a lot of fun. Let's get into the sounds here. Okay. So my session here for Bring Me the Horizon's Drown. As always, I like to start off with my master bus chain. It sets the stage for everything. It's really important to how I mix. I have videos on this talking about how I do it. I'm using the classic strip, the SSLE channel. I add a lot of top and some lows to that. I'm using a stock EQ. It needed some more of that low mid information there, so I added that in. And then I'm using a multi-band to smooth out those low parts, make sure they weren't coming up too much in volume. Multi-band compression is a great way to do that. The SSL compressor, that's working pretty hard, especially on this chorus section here. Up to 4 dB of gain reduction. I typically don't try to go that heavy-handed with it, but it sounded good, right? And sound always wins in the end. So that was important there. A limiter, of course, then ozone matching it to the track Drown from Bring Me the Horizon. So that was the master bus setup. Let's get into the drums. Believe it or not, I am using Easy Drummer 2 because back in the day I made a preset for That's the Spirit drums, and I used Easy Drummer 2. And so when I went to do this video, I'm like, hey, you know, I did this in Easy Drummer 2. I think I could just pull that up here. But you can do this in Spirit Drummer, Easy Drummer 3, piece of cake. This is just the Made of Metal Velvet Tone kit. I'm using, I believe here, let's check some of the individual kit pieces. The Mapex Velvetone, so kick 4. And snare 5. However, the samples are going to be taken over quite a bit here. The rest of the kit is completely stock. I do have some processing on the drums themselves. I'm using Virtual Tape Machine. Just kind of warms up your drums, soaks up some of those transients. I'm using a couple instances of Virtual Mix Rack as well, just adding some virtual channel, a little thickness, a little shimmer. The distressor is just doing a little compression on the drum bus. You don't want to go over heavy-handed with this, or else the overheads are going to start to sound real shrill. So it looks like a lot, but the mix knob is turned down quite a bit here. And I'm using kilohertz reverb just to add some reverb to the entire drum bus. And then for the kick drum, I'm using quite a bit here. Virtual Tape Machine, again, I like using on the individual kit pieces. Virtual Mix Rack, adding some thickness and presence. So if I take the plugins off, a lot of thickness and attack. And then I'm using the Infinity EQ. I don't know how much I'm doing with this one, but I'm doing some cuts and boosts there with that plugin. Yeah, just a little in the mids and notching out some bad frequencies there. So that's the kick drum, the snare, Virtual Tape Machine, Virtual Mix Rack, and I have a couple samples here going on for my track, if I can select them both here. And samples are doing the heavy lifting for my track, if I'm being honest here. So I'm using Easy Drummer 2. I'm using one from the Hard Rock kit. The main sample I want to talk about is this Easy Drummer 3 sample, which it's just the Taylor Larson snare, the main snare. I use this snare all the time. It's incredible sound. If you don't have the Taylor Larson sample pack, you should get it, okay? Using the main snare, it's tuned down a little bit. I did a little EQ notching. Also, it's good to note that on some of these rolls here, where the snare's going, you need to make sure you automate your snare down, especially your samples, so it just doesn't sound like it's machine gun shots, okay? I think that's really important. Toms have some, I believe, EQ on them. There's not a lot of toms in this track, taking out some mid-range, it looks like they're notching out some stuff. Overheads, notching out some frequencies. And then I added just some EQ to the reverb as well, taking out some of the low end. So the drums on this thing should sound like this. Let's move on here to the bass guitar, which there's not just a bass guitar, there's also a bass synth. So the bass guitar sounds like this, plus the sub bass. So I have a couple different channels going on here. The DI is my DI trick, taking all the highs, adding a bunch of lows, and then squashing the crap out of it. It gives you a consistent low end while having the attack of an amp. Using the limiter there to even further do that. Then for the amp track, looks like I'm using Bias FX2 for this one. And I think it was just a standard Ampeg model. for it. I wanted some clank on the top, you know, some attack of that bass guitar. I listened to some of the stems that were online for this song to get inspiration for that. But yeah, so it should be Ampeg head. But I think what's important is some of the individual processing here on the entire bass guitar. So I'm using the virtual channels, some low lift, taking out some of the high highs in the EQ, adding some low lows, using multiband. If I take it all off, it's a lot more rounder with all my processing. The CLA76 using the black channel, this is pretty common, and then the limiter here. And then for the sub bass, I just printed an expand patch, so there's no processing on it. The key with that was just getting the volume correct, honestly. If it's too loud, it sounds too subby, doesn't sound right, not enough. There was definitely some like low information missing there. Now, if we move on to guitars, for the guitar section here, these are like the main rhythm guitars I use, and I have some like backing ones. Lee Malaya does a lot of multi-tracking when it comes to his guitars. So for EQ, I'm using the Toneforge Jason Richardson, which it has this character that the Bring Me the Horizon guitars have, and I really liked it, and I put it on, and it seemed to work. I messed with amps forever on this track. Couldn't get anything I liked, and then I went, you know what, I'm gonna use Toneforge Jason Richardson, but it needs some processing. The first EQ is getting rid of Toneforge Jason Richardson. Has a lot of like super subby lows that needed to go, and then I'm notching some stuff out here, additional notching. Using tilt equalizer, it was just a little too bright. That's a stock plugin Reaper. Then I'm using the CLA76. Just doing a bit of, you know, compression there. Nothing too crazy. That's some other electric guitars. This was an amplitude patch for the other two, which were just Marshall patches. This stuff is much quieter. I'm using the same signal chain as I did with the other guitars here. There's an octave lead, using the amplitude patch. And there's also some interesting guitars in the intro and verse parts. This like lead, super delayed out guitar. I actually use Toneforge Misha Mansour for that. That plugin's not even on the market anymore, so you know that I'm pulling something random out there. But I used like the post-rock lead for that. And then there's like this picking guitar part on the right channel during the pre-chorus part, or the verse parts, and I didn't know exactly how to play it. It's a really tricky part. But you add that all in, all the guitars sound like this. You add the bass in. So that's a pretty good band section so far, and we can't forget about all the programming that comes with this track. There's also the clean guitars, of course. Let me open up the amplitude patch for that. Yeah, so I'm using amplitude 5 for those clean guitars. I believe it was that same sort of Marshall channel, probably a JCM 800 or something like that. But yeah, so it's JCM 800. This is the same patch I use for the leads. I've got some of the rhythm or the reverb rack unit on there. This is the settings for the amp, and then I added a bunch of processing, emphasizing some mid-range, adding a limiter to make that pick attack feel bigger, and then layer 2 reverbs, the Valhalla and the Kilohertz reverb, to give it that sound. Sound incredible. So that's all the guitars. Let's get to the synths. These are all expand patches, by the way. And I just have some various production here. Got the calm synth sounding there, like a riser orchestra sort of sound, a choir that goes with my crowd sound that I'll explain how I got. There's like a lead synth part, and then a piano in the verse, and a lead piano in the verse actually, and they kind of interlock with the cleans. This album's so well produced. It took me a while to figure out all these parts. Once I did, it was so much fun. And then there's a chorus synth, just adding some additional, just like that part, just kind of adding a synth layer to that. So all the synths sound like this in the chorus. I'm just cutting out lows, adding highs. You don't want this to interfere with the band or feel too upfront. You want to balance it correctly. So that's how I was able to do there. Then it's just an FX swell in the beginning of the track. That's what this is. And then I have this crowd noise, and that's the chant, the yell at the beginning of the track. I also did it here. It's just multiple layers of me recording these sounds. It looks like it was 8 layers in a couple different octaves, and I added a ton of processing to that. I used Metatune to tune it real quick. A bunch of distortion. You want to make it feel like a crowd, so you need to add delays, distortions that are all very short. I used the Valhalla Supermassive Reverb, a multi-band to keep those harsh frequencies out, and then a final EQ at the end. So just notching some stuff out because I was distorting it hard because I wanted to sound like a bunch of people chanting because I didn't have a bunch of people, probably like they did, but I think I did a good job of emulating the sound here. So that sounds like a crowd of people. I wanted that to come in. Now let's get into the vocal section here. A lot of great vocal production on this record. So I have a lead vox, and then I have some doubles and some harmonies as well. So for the leads,
what doesn't kill you makes you wish you were dead. Got a hole in my soul going deeper and deeper.
I really wanted to process that close, intimate verse part different from the chorus, which are more, it's almost screaming. Pretty close to screaming at that point. On the entire vocal bus, I have an EQ, carving, adding some upper mids, de-essing pretty aggressively because of the compression, CLA mix hub, adding some highs, using fresh air really subtly there. The multiband, of course.
What now?
To get rid of the harsh stuff. Additional limiter, and then just a little bit of reverb. You can see that chorus lead's really cooking. I'll explain that here. So for the lead vocal, these were tuned ahead of time, by the way. I'm using the Neumann, the virtual channel, adding some top, and using the distressor kind of as an on the way in chain. That was using the black CLA 76 for a more transparent sound. I didn't want super distorted sounding. I was going to do that later. This also applies to the verse vocal, by the way.
What doesn't kill you makes you wish you were dead.
Limiter just to hold it there.
What doesn't kill you?
Metatune, I'm using this as a doubler, not really to see no tunings on, but it's doubling the vocal.
What doesn't?
And then CLA Epic to add some ambience, just real subtle.
What doesn't kill you makes you wish you were dead. Got a hole in my soul going deeper and deeper.
It's adding some volume as well. Added some individual processing to the verse and the chorus. So the verse vocal, just a little low cut. The chorus lead, I add some additional distortion because I wanted to sound like I was screaming.
One more moment of this side.
I was screaming pretty aggressively, but it needed more aggression, let's just say. Ollie Sykes is a really good vocalist.
I'm not okay, and it's not alright. Who will fix me now? Dive in when I'm dead.
You can see it takes some of that aggression off when I take the distortion off. The double just has virtual mix rack, same settings, and the CLA 76 just to compress it there. And same thing with the harmonies. All the harmonies sound like this. They're all Waves harmony renders, but in context with the track, it's fine.
Who will fix me now? Dive in when I'm down. Save me from my...
Those are all the doubles, and then so all the vocals together sound like this.
Who will fix me now? Dive in when I'm down.
So with finally all that coming together, the full track begins to sound like this. Anyways, that is the sound from That's the Spirit. I did the track Drown here. Let me know in the comments, did I match it? Did I get close? If you'd like me to clarify anything, there was a lot in this track. I mean, there was over 65 tracks here. But I thought I got pretty close with this one. Leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel. Let me know if there's any of the sounds you'd like me to try and match. I love doing these. And we'll, as I said, you can get the stems in the description box down below. Here's a full playthrough of the track. So listen up, and I will see you guys next time.
Makes you wish you were dead. Got a hole in my soul going deeper and deeper, and I can't take one more moment of this silence. Loneliness is hard to bear. With the weight of the world getting harder. It comes in waves. I close close my